morning, everybody. Welcome to our second day of the conference. For the ones physically present, we also have participants online. I see more participants here present than we expected. So, wow, you're real GIRP addicts. Congrats. I hope you had enjoyed last night our traditional Tafelspitz here in Austria. We have most of the speakers asked to join us via WebEx this morning, but some true addicts and committed to GIRP are physically present. So we're looking forward to your presentations. We have Dr. Christa Wirtuma-Hoche. She intended to come and join us here, but in the view that the Austrian health minister has issued some guidance to avoid unnecessary social gatherings, she will join us at 12:30 by WebEx as well. Yeah, we wish you an interesting second day of our conference, and I will hand over to the moderator of the first session, our president, Bernd Grabner, who really doesn't need an introduction in this forum. Thank you, Bernd.
Thank you, Monica. Good morning, everybody. I'm not Rafik, as you might see, and because of that, I'm not that experienced in the topic that we are talking about. But since Rafik had to leave because of the travel ban to the US, I was asked to moderate this session, and I'll do my very best. But what I would like to skip is my own expectations about the topic that we are talking about today, because I guess there is not a lot that I can tell you. What I would like to do is to introduce our panelists. We've got one here in person, Thomas. We got another one online, that is Sebastian, and I will shortly introduce them to you. Thomas de Bie was appointed CEO of CAPI on February 1st, 2016. His earlier career was spent in sales and marketing and spearheaded CAPI's European expansion. He holds a Master of Science in International Business, is Dutch from origin. Thomas lives and works in France since 2006. Thomas, would you please come to me? Thank you very much. And we have Sebastian present online. Can we hear him? Monica? Can we hear him or see him? Okay, I can't see him or hear him. Obviously there is a technical issue, sorry for that. Maybe there's a virus in the system. No. Well, as long as we fix the issue, I will introduce to you Sebastian. Okay. With more than 15 years of experience in logistics and transportation, working, for instance, for DHL or TNT, Sebastian has a strong background in anticipating the impact of new regulations in storage and distribution. The need to rethink the distribution models across Europe due to the new European GDP led Sebastian to join Petit Forestier, the worldwide leader in refrigerated vehicles, containers and display units rental in 2017. Sebastian is also a member of the supervisory board of ProPharma, the largest pharmaceutical cluster in Europe, which enables him to rely on a strong network of experts to best coordinate strategic projects with all the players. For instance, manufacturers, wholesalers, pharmacists, hospitals, other service providers, and so on. Sebastian, I hope you can hear us. We can't hear him. So what we'd like to start with is, Thomas, maybe, I guess you prepared a short presentation.
Yes.
Is that right? So I would like to ask you to start with it, and I guess in the meantime we can fix our technical issues. Wonderful. Thank you.
Yes.
The floor is yours.
Thank you. I will take just a little remote control. Okay. Well, thank you for having me. First of all, I will tell you very quickly a little bit about CAPI, and then afterwards I will present a new concept which responds to the subject of this morning's session. Is like how do I see for me the pharmaceutical wholesaling in 10 years. So I will try to explain this in the vision of CAPI, so only on the box side of the business. So first of all, CAPI, we design, qualify, and manufacture packaging solutions for the pharmaceutical manufacturers, pharmaceutical wholesalers, and as well the food industry. We started 25 years ago implementing the famous plastic tote for a big cooperative pharmaceutical wholesaler in France. And since then, we developed ourselves mainly in French-speaking countries. So today we have a dominant market position in France, as well in Belgium, in some African countries. But as well, we are developing ourselves more on European level now. So we are very present as well in Eastern countries like Romania or countries like Sweden. So we are really developing ourselves now on European level. I will tell you today a little bit about our idea, about our concept tote. What I told you, it's already almost 25 years that we are selling this plastic tote, which you all know. The thing is that we, within our company, it's already 25 years that we are selling almost the same product. Since the early beginning, there was very few automatization inside the warehouses when we started. When the automatization came inside the warehouses, the totes were already existing. So the automatization process was actually adapted to the plastic tote. And since then, because of the big investments that need to be done by the wholesalers, and everything, all the automatization was adapted to this plastic tote, actually the product never changed. So we, inside our company, we said, with the second generation, my wife and myself, we said to each other, what are we going to do the next 25 years? Are we still selling this exactly same product or not? So within our company internally, we said, okay, how do we see the future of this famous plastic tote? That was the starting point. And there was as well a second motivation why to lead this internal project. It was also because of the new GDP.
Oui.
Yeah. As well because of the new GDP guidelines, where there was a special mention for CRT products. So a lot of pharmaceutical wholesalers are wondering, okay, we master the 2 to 8 products, the cold chain products, but how we will transport in the future those ambient products. So a lot of clients, they went directly to, okay, we will need to change our vehicles. And nobody thought about the tote itself. So that was the second motivation why we started this project internally. First of all, I would like to phrase a few statements, active versus passive transportation. For us, the active transportation mode, plus 2 to 8 or 15-25, does not cover the entire supply chain of a pharmaceutical wholesaler. I don't say this only because we are a passive solution provider, but I will argument this with 3 very clear ideas. First of all, if you visit the warehouses, most of them are temperature controlled inside the area where the products are stored or where they are picked. But at the moment when there is a night preparation for next day delivery, they will be stored inside the expedition areas, and still a huge part of the whole of the warehouses inside the expedition areas where the trucks will come in are not temperature controlled. Secondly, This is an example, for example, in France, but I think it happens as well elsewhere. There are deliveries which are done when the pharmacy is closed. And this is a typical example. They call it in France a sas, meaning like there is a barrier between the entry door of the pharmacy and the boxes are stored outside. So in winter, summer, it can be hot, cold. The boxes are standing outside with the medicines. So if you have an active transportation, it does not cover your entire supply chain because it can stay for 1, 2, 3, 5 hours outside. And thirdly, there are door openings as well, which are very frequently and which can disturb as well the temperature airflows inside the truck. So already for these 3 arguments, I think which are very clear, investing only in an active transportation does not solve your problem, and you don't control in terms of temperature your entire supply chain. Compared to the passive transportation mode, it does cover for us, in terms of quality, the complete chain, supply chain of a wholesaler. Why? Because at the moment from picking, you put it in a controlled area, in this case, a box. And as well, the box is completely integrated in existing logistical infrastructures. So even when the box is standing inside the expedition area, non-controlled environment, the products are well maintained, or if they are stored when the pharmacy is closed, the temperature is maintained. As well, which is a very important point as well, is that a passive system guarantees availability at all times. If you have an active van and it's standing out during overnight, the van can be very cold when it's freezing outside, or it can be very hot. So you need, first of all, a time that the van is getting on temperature. So a passive system guarantees you availability and a delivery at all times. So this apart, but which is very important for me to repeat. So the objective of our concept is installing a shipping tote for the future. First of all, what are the objectives of this concept? It's to provide to our wholesale customers an all-in-one tote, meaning a tote which responds to the latest GDP guidelines, with a special mention for CRT products, but a tote which can also transport 2 to 8 products. So only one tote to manage. It's covering the complete supply chain. This is coming back to what I just said earlier. Proposing a solution that integrates as well your existing automation processes, and a unique solution for all pharma shipments. So it's a concentration of technology innovation for the drug transport. Now the solution in detail. First of all, you see the exterior. The exterior, it's exactly identical as the tote which exists already for 25 years. We need to keep these dimensions and this design because what I just said earlier as well, all your logistical infrastructures are made for this design. So you have a guarantee that it will fulfill, that it integrates in your current logistics circuit. You can stack them at the same way as you do today. As well, the lids, you can stack them as today. There's absolutely no difference. But the difference with the new tote is that it's isolated. It's isolated, and then you will say, yeah, but if I have a tote which is isolated, I cannot stack it anymore. It will lose a lot of space in my warehouse. And this was the challenge of us, the technical challenge, to come up with a solution for this. It's isolated, so you will say, yeah, I will lose a lot of useful volume inside my box. I need to have more boxes. No. Today, the boxes, they have an average filling rate of 60%, 70%. So we have a 63% filling rate compared to the actual box solution. So there is no loss of space. So what does the solution do? Like, instead of keeping it fixed, to able to stack it, the box will open from itself. I will show you some pictures afterwards on the way how it works. so that you still can stack all the boxes, that you can have the same number of stacking, so no loss of space. It's a very robust and effortless opening and closing. I will show you in a moment. You have an increased productivity for order preparation because, which is also exceptional with the solution, is that today the 2 to 8 products in your warehouses, they're all prepared apart in a separate area, very manual. And today with this box, it will be completely integrated in your automatization process. Also on this automatization process, we have already some ideas, which I will show you in a small video afterwards. Here you will see the solution. So it's you can here it's more clear. You can stack all the boxes in itself. And here I will show you just a small PowerPoint of how it can work, our idea in an automatization process. So here you have on the screen you can see a destacker. We will need to. The only thing we need to change inside your warehouse to make this product work are the destackers, nothing else. Today within our company, we have some people which are specialized in this automatization process, and we are also looking forward today, Capi, in a partner for this project, which is a specialized company inside automatization, to propose to the wholesalers a complete package. One company who can propose you the destacker and integrate this in your existing logistical warehouses, and we as a box specialist for this new box. So yeah, this could be maybe an idea for the future of transporting the medicines, having all in one tote for all shipments, which respect the ambient temperatures, which respect 2 to 8 temperatures, and you can keep your standard vehicles as it is today, and no loss of storage space in your warehouse, and having an increased productivity of your order preparations. Okay, this was the idea I'd like to share with you. We have worked on within our company. We will develop it. We have some wholesale customers which are supporting us in this, and with who we will do normally in 2021 the first trials with the first prototypes. Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Thomas. That was very interesting to hear. I would be interested in hearing from you.
Yes.
The solutions that you presented to us right now is one for, I would call it the classical supply chain, the way it is today, from manufacturer to wholesaler to the pharmacies and in the end to the patient. Mm-hmm. Do you think, because the topic of our session is what will the last mile look like in 10 years, do you expect any other developments in the supply of patients? Do you think that the classical way will be broken up? Will there be more online? Will there be more even drone deliveries? And how does Capi actually prepare itself for these challenges that are arising at the moment?
Yes, of course. So, of course, there are more online companies delivering medicines. The struggle for them is that the temperature-controlled medicines to transport is a real issue, because it's a one-way transport. They cannot take back the box. So we already have a difficulty with this in terms of environment. What we do with the packaging, which is at the customer, at the patient, and secondly, there is also like a big cost barrier, because they cannot reuse it. And when there is a cost barrier, the quality of the solution, of course, is different as well. So for the moment, I think Capi has a very solid reputation in terms of quality. So for the moment, it's not a sector which we are actively working on. On the other side, we are working as well for some pharmaceutical manufacturers, with who we have done some brainstorming already on some drone deliveries. For example, in terms of crisis. There was a crisis lately in Puerto Rico, for example, after a big storm, the roads are blocked. So then, indeed, a drone delivery could be a good option. Or yesterday, we have talked about it as well, in some African countries where it's difficult to reach certain areas quickly, a drone solution could be a good option. And some pharmaceutical manufacturers are already testing this. Merck, for example, they are investing in this technology. There are, of course, also some restrictions in this area. When there is bad weather, for example, you cannot make a delivery with a drone. Or some other government restrictions on air transport. Of course, there are some alternatives. It's interesting, but yeah, I think we are only at the very beginning. Yeah.
Okay, thank you very much for this valuable insight. I think the crucial point for the future will be, will temperature control or temperature range control for the products be valid for the patient as well? So for the delivery to the patient, I guess that's the very crucial point. And it's good to hear that you even think about these new upcoming challenges. And it was very interesting to hear. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you very much. Thank you.
Are there any questions from the audience for Thomas? I did not see any on the app. Any questions from the room? Please.
So I'm Carl from Modum. I have two questions. First question being, what's your view on potential solutions with regards to last mile delivery, where instead of delivering, or the idea of delivering the medication straight to the patient at home, you set up certain stations which are condition controlled, where patients, which are in the vicinity of the address, where patients can go and then kind of open the secure lock, take out the medication, and go home with that. So I know that in Asia, in South Korea, for example, they're thinking of solutions like this because they already have experience with regards to deliveries of perishable foods. And the second question is, how do you see the regulation developing with regards to a certain tightening with regards to actually having to monitor your shipments in the last mile? So kind of, at the moment, I understand, you don't have to, you have some statistical things you do, but maybe in the future, you might need to monitor every single shipment.
Yes, yeah. Yeah, first of all, to respond to this question, it's, for example, if I take a pharmaceutical manufacturer, for example, we supply Sanofi Pasteur in France, which is a leading vaccine producer. Sanofi in France, they ship 10,000 pallets of vaccines a year, which are temperature controlled. So they have, it's very easy for them. Why? Because they have one single product to transport, one single temperature to respect, and they have also the financial means to monitor all the shipments, to trace back all the systems, and more importantly, when there is a problem, they have the resources and the time to identify the root causes of this temperature deviation. If you're going to ask the same on a pharmaceutical wholesaler, who is in contradiction, I have, for example, one customer of me in France, he's sending 40,000 shipments, cold chain shipments a day, a lot of different products. So if he would monitor each single shipment, and I mean, on such a high number of shipments, of course, there will be some temperature deviations, which can have causes which are very variable. It can be, or the package is not good prepared. We can imagine hundreds of scenarios. So you also need to analyze all these data which are coming in. So first of all, in terms of investment, I think it's. I don't think it's possible for wholesale to invest in such a big number of monitors. But then, okay, we monitor, but we also need to treat all those incoming data, and also for this, the resources are just not available. Also, what I think is that we in CAPI, for example, we are investing now in a complete new building in France for testing our packaging solutions. And together with the wholesaler, we qualify our packaging according each different region. And even if we have in France national wholesalers, we qualify their packaging according to the region in which they are delivering. So the south of France, north of France, the center of France. And because they have such a small circle routes of 1 to 2 hours, I think with a good risk analysis and a solid qualification, I don't think really it's necessary to monitor all the totes which are going out. So for all these reasons, I don't think it's a necessity for the wholesalers. And again, never compare a pharmaceutical manufacturer with a pharmaceutical wholesaler. It's just not possible. It's not even if they are transporting the same product, they absolutely don't have the same way of working and the same constraints. So I hope to have responded on your question. Yeah. No? Okay.
Well, I guess you gentlemen, you can have a chat over a coffee afterwards and go even more into details. Thank you, Thomas.
Yeah.
It was very interesting to hear.
Okay.
And I hope that we can hear Sébastien in the meantime already. So I would like to ask him to start.
Hello. Hello, hello.
Good morning.
Good morning. Do you hear me well?
Yeah, we do.
Okay, great. Thank you.
And I would like to ask you to start with your presentation before we go through some questions and maybe have additional ones from the audience.
Of course. Well, thanks for the introduction. As you could not hear me, I just want on this first slide to explain why we are referring to a successful global shift when we speak about temperature control. The trends we observe today are not so much so specific about personalized medicine, e-commerce, or technologies, is actually related to the existence of many channels that exist currently in the distribution model as it is operated across Europe, and the rise of regulations that makes it, of course, even more complex to find one model that fits for all. So I will speak today on behalf of two organizations, Petit Forestier and Pole Pharma, which I will briefly introduce to you. And more than presenting a service offering, our intention here is to refer to initiatives where we are trying to bring value on the supply chain with our respective expertise. Let me see how I can change this slide. For some reason, it's not going through. I don't know if... Can you see the next slide?
No, unfortunately not.
Oh, okay. As I can see, I'm speaking to the moderator. I don't have access to the tool, so someone needs to give me moderator needs to give me control.
I will try to do it. Hang on.
Yeah.
I get you the mic, and perhaps you can explain
Hang
to
on,
him.
we're trying to fix this. Sorry,
No,
Sébastien. Just a second.
You explain?
Hello, you are the moderator, so it's your screen, so you have control.
I am not. I am not. I look on the screen and the moderator is GIRP.
Yes.
So the control is...
No, yes.
We tried to change that.
Okay. We can show your presentation then, and you can just tell us when to change the slide.
All right.
Okay, thank you.
Let's do it this way.
Thank you. Okay, thank you. So Pole Pharma is actually happens to be today the biggest cluster for pharmaceutical manufacturers. It's originally a French cluster, but it happens to be also the biggest on the European level under that format. It's 53% of the French production, and it has currently more than 300 members. So Petit Forestier is one of them. And I also had the opportunity to join as a member of the supervisory board. And this is a very great environment to sit with the industry and try to bring initiatives such as the one we are referring to. Next slide, please.
The next slide is on already.
All right. A few examples. Well, we also organize through Pole Pharma many events and networking opportunities. This is some of the examples because it's not limited to supply chain. It's actually pretty much about industrial performance, innovation, new drugs, and also getting the support of private and public institutions to move forward. You can see some of the companies that are part of the cluster at the moment. Next slide. Petit Forestier, so well, as it sounds French, it is a French company, but we are today the worldwide leader in renting services of temperature-controlled vehicles, containers, and display units. You can see on the picture a few examples of what we do. Next slide, please. And the numbers today, we have more than 55,000 temperature-controlled vehicles around the world. We are in 22 countries, and this is roughly nearly 300 depots in France and in Europe. So we, of course, believe that we are quite a great expert when we talk about temperature-controlled. And we created a sector, a division dedicated to pharmaceuticals 3 years ago to see how we could increase the use of temperature control device in the sector. Next slide. I want to share on this slide a bit of the history of the company because it does reflect how the food industry evolved in France and in Europe, and when we could see a shift, a major shift leading to what we have today, a fully integrated end-to-end cold chain in the food industry. So from the early 19th, where we used to carry living animals, we shifted to carrying meats and to actually develop in temperature-controlled rental in the early 1970s. And this is where we had what most of you must have heard, the ATP, which is an agreement about international carriage of perishable food stuff and special equipment that needs to be used for the carriage. And we could see and feel a very strong shift. As you can see, we moved from, let's say, 50 or a few hundreds of vehicles to more than 50,000 today, as we accompanied the industry from France, Europe, and today globally, because we also are in the US, Africa, and Middle East. Next slide, please. Although we have very strong numbers, a lot of vehicles and containers around the globe, we see today more than 90% is still related to the food industry. We know there is a strong challenge in the healthcare market, but we still do not see a shift like we did in the food industry. And this is why we decided to focus on this on the market, understand it better, and make sure that if there is a transition, it is as short as possible, because a long transition is what will cost a lot of money, and investments will suffer on the longer period. Next slide, please. You will see on this slide a few market players, which you know. Some of them are like Chronopost, are a bit more French, but I think we have the same situations in most of the countries. So we have, what makes it very hard for us is the diversity and lack of alignment due to the diversity of the networks. Of course, direct to pharmacies is one of the strong trends. And in France, we have a big share of the products sold to the pharmacies that are sold direct. And we, as a service provider to the operators and distributors, would struggle at one point to understand where the market is going, as we need to invest for the next 10 years. This is how we operate as a rental company. We need to understand the assets, innovate, and make sure that we have a clear direction for the next 10 years. Next slide, please. On that slide, you will see on the left, well, it's probably a bit small maybe, but typically the clients we have in the food industry. And on the right, you will see the profile of the players we use to speak to exclusively. The difference being that on the left, we're actually dealing with distributors. They have their own vehicles, their own fleet, their own drivers. Their specialty is to distribute products, and the delivery is part of that expertise. On the right, we are talking about transport providers who themselves depend on the healthcare industry, on the manufacturers, to see where they should go. And in a way, for many, many years, we wouldn't see any clarity in what are the vehicles. We still today see a lot of different assets in the country. So we decided to really focus on the distributors in healthcare as well, on the wholesalers, to understand what will the last mile look like, and how can we accompany that part of the industry. Next slide, please. So our challenge today, similarly to what we saw in the food industry, is how can we turn any regulation, and of course we are referring here to the European GDP, but how can we turn any regulation into an opportunity rather than a constraint, which is quite a big challenge, because I think it's the wholesalers are also going through a few challenges on their plate. So more than ever, we want the ability to comply to the regulations to be a strength and not a weakness or anything that would have a wrong impact on the finance. Next slide. So how did Petit Forestier and Polpharma combine strength? Well, we decided to organize roundtables based on our expertise. You can see some of the brands and the companies who joined the first roundtables. The idea was, first of all, to go through the learnings from the distribution of perishable goods, make sure we all understand the regulations, the regulatory context for pharmaceutical products as it is today and where it's heading, remind the key principles of cold chain, transformation, innovation, again, based on the true experience from the food industry, and the deliverable that we wanted to achieve, and that is ongoing at the moment, was to draft the recommendation for the distribution of pharmaceutical products within 15 to 25 degrees. Next slide, please. I'll give you here a few examples of what we have in terms of recommendations. So recommendation being the community sitting together with the expert, and in the case of pharma, with the pharmacist responsible, and agreeing on common guidelines until there is another law or anything that is implemented, so the industry can already start moving together. Here are a few examples. One is on the left, a recommendation to store the products in a cold chamber, in a fridge at the pharmacy. This one was issued in 2012. As it states actually that you cannot have a normal fridge in your pharmacy anymore. You need to operate with dedicated display units, especially for pharmaceutical products, but it comes with so many constraints and such a huge financial impact for the pharmacies that it's not really followed at the moment. So we are also supporting this one. The one on the right are the recommendations to store and distribute the products from 2 to 8 degrees. I guess this one is quite, I wouldn't say famous, but it's quite followed by the industry. Vaccines are definitely one of the most critical products to be handled under such requirements. And therefore, we believed the next step today is to have such a guide for the 15 to 25 degrees. Next slide, which you can, on this one, it may be a bit small, but you would see all the companies such as Baxter, Novartis, GSK, Sanofi, Biogen, Lilly, who contributed to the recommendation from 2 to 8 degrees. And it's interesting to see that the documents, the key documents that it refers to are the documents from the ATP as well. So everything that helped the food industry to reach another level of compliance in the early 70s. Next slide, please. So talking about distribution 15 to 25 degrees, we received confirmation a few months ago that the Council of the Pharmacists, so 2 sections actually, the one from the industrial, from the manufacturers, which is section B, and the section C, that is the section from the wholesalers, pre-wholesalers, and distributors in general, have agreed to draft such a document. And we today, together with Polpharma, are sitting with as many pharmaceutical companies as possible in France, but we are also, of course, willing to do that on the more European level to make sure that we will target the right objectives and that what will appear in this document can be implemented as well. Next slide, please. One thing we like to remind in the principle of a cold chain, and this is not rocket science, but it's a cold chain, we need to have everyone aligned on the same level of quality and on the same targets. If we have a few players doing too much or overdoing it, then it does not help at all the rest of the industry to align. And this is where operating with Polpharma, that is 53% of the French production of pharmaceutical products, we have the unique opportunity to align everyone and make sure that we will define a roadmap with a step-by-step approach, realistic targets, and of course, a cost-effective evolution of how we will deal with the 15 to 25 shipments to be distributed to the pharmacies and the hospitals. Next slide, please. Something we also learned from the food industry is if you want to have a global rule, or if you want to have to align everyone, you need to work on the exceptions. And sometimes the exceptions will be very occasional case or very small case that may not be relevant for the big players, but it will make it viable for the smaller artisans. One of the examples we have in the food industry is if you have someone carrying fish from point A to point B and the distance is not more than 80 kilometers and there's no breakdown in the middle, then this artisan will be able to not drive an isotherm truck and can just operate with ice as they used to. This sounds like a small segment of the matter, but it's very important to give that access to the smaller player and then align everyone on a bigger rule. The pharmacist responsible is also, of course, a resource that we don't have as such in the food industry, and we believe that is an opportunity to still have a case-by-case approach and make sure that we don't have to list or define every matter or every situation in a document. Next slide, please. So where do we find pharmacists responsible at every level of the organization? Of course, in the wholesalers. If you look at the French situation, you would need not less than 45 or 50 depots to be able to distribute all the French pharmacies. We have started many developments in terms of vehicles, in terms of processes, in terms of creating value as well, repositioning the wholesaler not only in the segment of selling medicine, but also being a key segment of the distribution, also eventually for the shipments coming from direct to pharmacy. And this is where our focus is today. We are talking with the biggest players, considering a large fleet of vehicles. A few things that are, of course, quite confidential at that level, but we are also developing, prototyping vehicles that we believe could be the standard of tomorrow, looking for a strong efficiency on the cost, so it would not impact the business in the wrong direction, and it would rather create value and potentially monetization rather than a cost that would be too huge in the current situation. Next slide. Just as a summary, and again, it would require to go much more into details, but based on our history and based on what we see in that the pharmaceutical industry is going through, we believe to succeed such a transformation, of course, we need to make sure the duration of the transition is not too long, because that's where it would cost the most. We need to head together in the same direction. That sounds obvious, but it's very hard to apply on a daily basis. We, as Petit Forestier, are usually in the shadow. I would say we are the service provider of the service provider. I myself come from DHL and CNC, and I realized the one dealing with the asset needs to come in front of the stage in such a period. So what we are looking at now is being able to provide clarity on the regulations so we can gain at least 10 years visibility. That would give us the ability to innovate and invest. That means agreeing on the standards of tomorrow, and of course do it for, but most importantly, with the pharmaceutical industry, which is where Polpharma is very key in what we do currently in France and what we are now in the process of doing on a more European level. This, we believe, are the most strategic points to be successful in such a process, and that's nothing we can do alone. The reason why we wanted to get in touch with GIRP and that we are happy to be involved and provide our input today is to call upon anybody in the pharmaceutical industry who would like to contribute and join us in that in this initiative. Thank you.
Next slide. Is it, or was it the last one?
Oh, it's
okay.
the last one. The last
This
one
I
is
didn't
thank
see.
you.
Thank you. So thank you very much for this interesting insights. What I would be interested in hearing from you is, what do you expect will the supply of the patient look like in 10 years from now? Do you think, also from your customers or your partners' perspective, will there be a direct supply of patients through wholesalers, through manufacturers? What are your expectations in this area? And if there is a direct supply of a patient, what will the regulation look like, and how will temperature control, for instance, can be provided for a shipment directly to the patient?
Well, we believe there will be an end-to-end supply chain with temperature control management. Can be with packaging or can be with vehicles or assets, but most importantly, we believe in the fact that the channels need to refocus. I mean, there needs to be less different channels. We see today players who have a mission of public health, like the wholesalers, and they are being challenged by service providers who actually are more are not dedicated to healthcare. They do a great job, like the integrators I used to work for, but this creates a disruption in the system. So talking about the last mile, yes, I do believe there will be more and more diversity in the demand, in the expectation, and we believe that more than ever there needs to be less channels on this last mile distribution. So wholesaler, for example, can definitely be a key player to combine all the different shipments and the different address. Because today we're talking about the pharmacy, but we are also talking about delivering to private addresses more and more.
Do you think that companies like Amazon or Alibaba will play a bigger role in the pharmaceutical supply chain in the future?
Oh, I would love to be able to guess that very precisely. I think these organizations do have a strong ability to invest. So in that case, if they foresee or if they accompany the shift, they can find a role to play. As it is today, I don't. As it is today, I don't see it as I don't see yet any initiative that can support what is needed. But if you take the example of temperature control, if a company like Amazon was to develop a last mile network that is fully temperature controlled 15 to 25, that could also, of course, provide an opportunity for the business.
Okay, thank you very much. Are there any questions from the audience?
There is a question from the app, and the question is, what are the similarities between food and pharma when looking at last mile? You have given the example of fish, which I thought is quite interesting. Can you elaborate a bit more on that, please?
Well, just to make sure, the example of fish was on the exception. That's probably one of the products from food that is very far from pharma. But no, of course, the similarities, if we are talking about sanitary risk, if you look in food, you have actually, we believe it's even harder to manage temperature control in food. If you fail, you would see it right away, and the risk on the health is actually can be more critical than even if you are dealing with a pharmaceutical product that has not complied with the temperature requirements. One of the similarities as well is there is a growing demand. There is a lot of different shifts in the way, let's say, consumers or the market is dealing with the products. And in that case, we need to get inspiration from what happened in the food industry and see what we can apply there. We went to visit actually a lot of food facilities with some of the big manufacturers of pharmaceutical products from France. And everyone, although we all know it, it's very interesting to look at it from the warehouse perspective and realize that we can learn a lot in the criticality of the product.
Interesting, thank you. I've got one last question actually that I would hear from you. In the different working groups that we had also with our industry partners, we often had the problem that the temperature products should be distributed in vary so much. Even within the ambient, what we call the ambient area, there is one between 15 and 25. There is others that say room temperature. And this is actually the biggest challenge for us as wholesalers. How do you approach this topic? Because what we think that might be necessary in the future is that you have a record for every single product saying it needs to be transported between 15 and 25, between 20 and 25, and so on, and that you need to monitor every single product. Would you think that this could happen?
I believe we need to target a range of temperature, let's say 15 to 25, and then agree on what can be the allowance of deviation. If we apply too many different range of temperatures or try to be too specific, like we would see, for example, in the blood samples, and this one we understand, some samples or biological samples need to be carried between 18 and 22 or 23. And that is for valid and very scientific reasons. But for pharmaceutical products, I think it's more about having a global rule and agreeing on the deviations, how long, to what extent. I think I heard probably it's in Austria where you target 15 to 25, but you allow until 2 degrees and to a maximum of 30. And then what do you do when that happens? And I believe this is when the pharmacist responsible is key, because we can never put all the different cases on paper. The only thing we can put on paper is aligning everyone on what's the objective and, let's say, a few criteria of allowance. But then on a daily basis, it will be a case-by-case decision driven by a pharmacist responsible, as we see it.
Okay, thank you very much. Well, if there are no more questions from the audience and no more questions from the app, I say thank you to you, Sebastian, and to Thomas. I hope it was interesting for the audience, and very much looking forward to hearing from you again. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Bernd, for the moderation. And now it's a special pleasure for me to introduce to you a good friend and colleague from Brussels. Also, he's not Belgian, but he's German. Mr. Jan Eggert. Jan is a member of the Senior Advisory Board of Concilius Europe and is a consultant for public affairs, like many of us in Brussels. Jan worked for many years with the Federation of German Industries, BDI or BDI as we would say. And in his last capacity, he was director of the International Trade Department. In between, he headed the German-American Chamber of Commerce in Atlanta, Georgia. And from 2000 to 2014, he was the Director General of the Foreign Trade Association in Brussels. And since 2018, he is in his current position. Jan, it's a pleasure you have made it here, despite all circumstances, and we are happy to listen to you. And Jan was kind enough to analyze the Green Deal and will tell us about the Green Deal and what is the relevant aspects for wholesale. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much for the kind introduction, Monica, and for the invitation to be here today. Ladies and gentlemen, who has heard about the Green Deal? Who has heard this term already? Okay, not the majority. Well, I can tell you in Brussels with the new European Commission, which is in its office since the end of last year, it is the big project. So, but now I need something for to change the slides. Okay. Thank you. So, this is the Green Deal. Well, this is not the Green Deal. This is the official chart of the European Commission about the Green Deal. And you see, it's not just some climate law, but it reaches out to many areas in the economy, but in the end also in private life. And it is regarded also among experts as, you can say, the most comprehensive and far-reaching EU project ever, just because it is not only climate, but as I will tell you, it goes in many other areas. But the main goal is to make the EU to be the first carbon-neutral continent by 2050. So you know this discussion, which has, of course, to do with the development of the climate, if you acknowledge it or not, but I think it is there. Most people acknowledge this, except a few top people in the United States, but it is to meet the challenges of the climate change and to reduce the global warming, to well below 2% by 2015, and this is the goal, for example, of the Paris Climate Agreement, and it's also part of the UN Sustainable Development Goals. To all of this, the EU has, of course, signed up and has to fulfill their commitments. And to say this also, the EU is so far not on the best way. It's also not so, as climate activists sometimes suggest, nothing has happened disastrous and so on. This is completely wrong. You can see, and I do not want to go into details now with figures, but you can see that the CO2 emissions have been reduced dramatically already in the EU, and also measured against production progress. So the production has increased and the CO2 emissions have been reduced. So this is quite an achievement, but not enough to get to these ambitious goals. And of course, certainly the protests of the activists, Fridays for Future, and whoever have also played a role when this new commission came up with this project, the Green Deal. Now, I can also tell you, so far there's not much there except a long paper, it's called, which is not yet a legislation, it's a roadmap more or less, and indicates what the European Commission wants to do and when it wants to do it and when it will fill it out. So, and a few parts of it have been published already, but still in a quite rudimental way. So a little bit more in detail, what is it about? First of all, it's about more ambitious climate goals, as I said already, and the EU has now started to publish a climate law. Well, this is there already, but it's a proposal. It has not been agreed by the member states, has not been agreed by the parliament, so there will be still a lot of changes. But what is important, it is relatively ambitious because so far the CO2 emissions should be reduced by 40% until 2030, and now this law provides that it should be reduced by 50 or 55, even 55%. The emission trading system should be extended to other areas, to transport and buildings, for example. There should be a carbon border adjustment mechanism to have a level playing field with foreign competitors. And all relevant EU legislation referring to climate should be again revised and sharpened, tightened, if you want. The idea behind this climate law is to set a long-term framework for the climate policy, define also clear obligations for all actors, and set a reliable framework for society and business. So it's not about formulating a completely new climate policy, but aiming at complementing and reinforcing this climate policy and setting this framework, which is, I think, in principle a good thing, but it has, of course, to be feasible and realistic. So together with CO2 reduction, the question is, of course, also how do we get energy, clean and affordable energy. And the Commission has also in view by, of course, promoting renewable energies and integrate more electricity, gas, and heating. So there should be also a special strategy for this, and the increase of renovation, the renovation rate of buildings. I will get to that later again. Second pillar is a new industrial strategy, which also has just been published, or the proposal just has been published this week, together with an SME, small and medium-sized enterprise strategy, and an action plan to enforce the European single market, which still is not a real single market. It still has a lot of deficiencies, and there's still a lot of potential to have gains by increasing the single market functioning. With that comes a new action plan for the circular economy. Also a proposal has been agreed. You know that we have already circular economy legislation, but new things should come: an extended producer responsibility, better repairability and better reuse of products, whatever that means. How can you repair your iPhone better or whatever? And Also a focus on resource-extensive sectors, intensive sectors like textiles, construction, electronics, and plastics. Textiles, for example, has not been part of the circular economy legislation so far, and will be in construction also, and will be there will be major focus on that. Third pillar, a strategy for sustainable and smart mobility. There are a lot of proposals in the pipeline which aim at reducing emissions dramatically, extending the emission trading system, increase the price of transport, at least on the basis of traditional energy sources. That will be, again, in the focus of the legislators, as it contributes quite a bit to the CO2 emissions. Then there are a few other related strategies which I will not mention more now. It's a chemical strategy, a zero pollution action plan for water and soil. Well, this I will mention again because it plays a role for pharmaceuticals also. A farm-to-fork strategy which focuses on a more sustainable agriculture, and a new forest strategy. Finally, the EU wants to be a global leader in terms of CO2 reduction and sustainable development. Of course, the environment doesn't know borders. If you want to be successful, you have to agree and cooperate with your neighbors and other major players who play a big role, like the US, China, India. There will be a special focus also on Africa. The EU wants to invest more in Africa, wants to cooperate more with Africa. So that will also come. And of course, for all that, you need money. And I also do not want to go into this more in detail. A green finance strategy is one issue which has to be formulated. Then the research and development policy should contribute more to these goals, particularly the Horizon Europe program. And the digital transformation also shall support the ecological transition. Now, what does all this mean, perhaps for the distribution sector? And when I say the distribution sector, I'm not only saying pharmaceutical distribution. But first of all, I have to say it's a little bit premature now to say this and this and this will happen, because we do not have the legislation yet ready-made. There are a few pieces on the table which still have to be discussed. And so I think it's also a good time or important for the business to observe what is happening, and also to monitor this, and also bring in their wishes and concerns. But to mention a few general effects, of course, conventional energy prices will go up through CO2 pricing. That is clear, particularly when you have, well, in which area ever, if it's energy for houses, if it's energy for transport and logistics. In transport and logistics, and this topic you know better than me, we will have a changing infrastructure. New investments will be needed, and there will be also new cost structures for transport services. Cooling and heating uses, of course, energy. So also there the question is, where does the energy come from? Energy efficiency plays a big role. And, well, it can be related in the end with higher cost. Buildings, I mentioned at the beginning. Buildings, the building sector has been quite neglected in many areas. I mean, you have private buildings, you have public buildings, and you have commercial buildings. I have the impression that in the sector of private buildings, the most have been done so far. But public buildings have been neglected, and I think also in the commercial sector a lot has been done. I mean, if you build a new warehouse today, you build it according to new standards, and then it's energy efficient. So quite some investment has been happening there also. But still, there will be pressure on this issue. Circular economy, I'm not so sure if that concerns the pharmaceutical wholesale. There will be sectoral strategies which will affect some distribution sectors more than others. As I see it in pharmaceuticals, I think you have reverse logistics, and that's a quite circular system already. So there will be perhaps not so much pressure. The Zero Pollution Action Plan for Water, Air and Soil, well, there right now already is quite in the discussion pharmaceutical residues in water. I don't know if that will get back also to you as an operator in this sector. And perhaps the chemical strategy might have some indirect effects related to a more restrictive use of chemicals and stronger environmental regulations in this sector. So you can see there will be some challenges which will derive from this Green Deal package. Therefore, it will be important to closely monitor the political discussion and new legislative projects, and also lobby for your interests. I think now it's still a good time. We are at the beginning of the process and expect until the middle or the end of next year to be all legislation somewhere on the table, not decided, but somewhere on the table. So it's, I think, a good time still for everybody, for the wholesale sector, for your sector, to observe the development and bring in your interests. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Jan. Are there any questions to Jan? This doesn't seem the case.
Complete.
That was very complete. Thank you very much. We might get back to you then on a bilateral level. And now we would like to break for coffee until 11 o'clock, where our last session will take place. Thank you, and have a good coffee.
beat.
So, welcome back to our very last session of this conference. Now we have the pleasure to announce you Matthias Dalkner from KNAP. Matthias is Director for Sales Healthcare Solutions and he has a global role and is responsible for the pharmaceutical wholesale business, which is the largest sector and the largest customer base within KNAPP. Matthias has been already working for 18 years in various functions with KNAPP, and I hope we have him online now. Horst unfortunately had to excuse himself, so we'll hear only Matthias during that session. Matthias, can you hear us?
Can you hear me?
Yeah. Hi,
Very
Matthias.
good. Hello, Monica.
Hi.
Good to hear you and see you.
Oh, I cannot see you yet,
Give me a
but
second.
maybe it's coming.
Hello?
Yeah, we all hear you, but we have a kind of weird screen somehow for the moment. Yeah, now we see you. Hi.
Hello. Hello, everybody. Hello. Hi. Okay. I'll try to share my screen. Give me a second. Right. So.
I hand you over to our technical expert team.
Okay. So can you see the KNAPP logo? Not yet?
No.
Okay.
We can see you very nicely, but nothing else yet.
Okay. Let me try again. Yeah, I think
Yeah. Now we see you.
presenter mode.
Wrong. You have to share screen.
Okay, just a sec.
So we are trying to install something here. Let's go.
Like this way.
Okay, it's fine.
Okay.
Okay, perfect.
Let's-
We see
Okay,
you,
maybe
your logo.
See in presenter mode or not? Okay, just give me a second so that you can see it full screen.
Maybe you instruct him what to do? Perhaps you can instruct what to do?
Just give me.
Just go.
I was in presenter mode, sorry.
Just go like
that-
this.
okay.
Just go next. We can see your presentation. We can see you. Just go.
Okay, good. I'll go. Okay. Hello from my side, of course. Very sorry and apologies not to be in Vienna. We were very much looking forward to it, but given the circumstances, we had no other choice. And still, a big congratulations to Monica and the team for putting this conference together under the worst conditions you can imagine. And I can imagine what you've been going through the last days. And I can tell you from the live stream, it worked really well and in a very professional manner, as always with GIRP. So big congratulations to you, Monica, and your team.
Thank you.
Talking about about my employer, KNAPP AG. I'll just try. Yeah, now it works. Basically, as you can see here on this picture, we have an export quota of 98%. Which means we are at the moment stressed out, with managing this crisis, bringing our people home from the US, for example, and making sure we are safe and our customer sides too. So this is quite tense times at the moment for a company like ours. We have 4,500 people spread over the globe. We have 1,850 installations in total. And we do a billion euro turnover, but challenging times always, but given the circumstances particularly. Okay, we are a tech company. We use technology we develop technology, and we also manufacture technology, of course. And we have been doing this for quite some time, since 1952, where our founder, an inventor in his basement, invented a donut filling machine. But when it really kicked off was when we discovered, or when he discovered the niche pharmaceutical wholesale, where there was a strong demand of putting orders together within a short time window, with the peaks to supplying the pharmacies. And that of course, this demand we discovered, and brought to the market technology that enabled this supplying with the same day delivery, a cutting of peaks with A-frames, and we went on further from this strong base with our pharmaceutical wholesale customers. We went on to becoming really one of the top energy suppliers in the world, and having leading technology in shuttle, for example, as you've just seen. Healthcare is one of our core industries, but others are, of course, fashion, retail, and food and industry. And it's always good to see how the sectors benefit from one another. For example, when this big fashion boom kicked off a few years ago with the eat.com, and so customers were approaching us, can you do? We need to do next day delivery. I said, yeah, okay, yeah. It's no problem, been there, done that, for our pharmaceutical wholesalers, this is not normal daily business. So, and the other way around as well, what we see in food retail, the requirements there in terms of not only batch lot control, but also expiry dates and cooling areas, that also helps us in other industries as well. So, but the driver for automation is, and always has been, our core industry, healthcare. And we have more than 700 healthcare installations worldwide, most of them in pharmaceutical wholesalers. With wholesalers, we have 1.4 go lives a week. We have, of course, multiple customer sites with the big wholesale groups in the world, but also small private wholesalers. And we not only we see healthcare on the one hand, of course, in pharma, but also on the other hand, with hearing aids, surgical equipment, dental and hospital supplies as well. And we are a partner for the whole healthcare or pharma supply chain. So from pellet to pill, whatever it takes to deliver to the patient in a bespoke way, with a label, in a vial, in a paper bag, whatever it is our business to support our customer to do that. The world is changing. Not a big secret, but the world is changing rapidly fast, and it's changing in a way that, of course, it becomes very digital. Digitalization is now an integral part of our everyday life. Smartphones, laptops, and other devices have become customers, and we are all so-called digital immigrants. Our children are digital natives. They grow up with those technologies. And if we go back in time a little, 150 years, we see really an evolution in terms of technology. On the left-hand side, you see Graham Bell with his first phone. And now with a mobile phone, you can do pretty much everything. Use it as a sat-nav, as a camera, book theater tickets, whatever it is. This is more than just communication. On the middle, horse and carriage. Now we are on the verge of having autonomous vehicles driving in our streets. This is just, a small step away. And on the right-hand side, we see a retail store, could also be a pharmacy store, where technology has also changed, or the time has also changed, because in the beginning you went in there, you said to the shopkeeper what you want and you get it. Now these days you have to, in a lot of cases, collect it yourselves. But all in all, the big shopping experience or the customer experience haven't really changed so dramatically compared with the other two examples. Is still a person entering the shop. So if we compare it to the middle example, where we are on this point of sale side of the development, it would be like, we're putting a fuel engine into a carriage without changing the chassis or anything. So there's still a lot of potential in doing greater things in that field as well. And the technology is there. Robotics, computer vision, AI, global network that plays an immense role. Then it enables a 24/7 marketplace, which is where goods are available constantly to customers and patients, and the world becomes significantly smaller through these changing technologies. We see those technologies, but also we see retail elements enter the pharma supply chain. And what do I mean with that? I mean with that a certain customer or patient centricity in a direction of convenience, providing the products in any time, anywhere, anyhow, to the most convenience to the patient. So not only worrying about the essential 7 hours of distribution, like product, place, condition, location, and cost, but having more in mind the experience of the customer and the convenience which is linked to that. And naturally, this development is also affecting the supply chain. So the supply chain, as we know it, is changing as well. So if we look at the developments in the healthcare industry, or how we used to work with our customers in the past, when I joined KNAPP, it was, can we have your order data? Give us your order data, and then tell us, which growth to apply for the next 5 or 7 years, and then we design you a warehouse with a nice technology, A-frame, conveyors, and then you're safe. It's not so simple anymore these days, because you have more and more factors coming into this recipe. We have legal regulations, GDP, FMD, of course, which strongly influences the processes in a warehouse. We have new business models, like every wholesaler prepares now for e-commerce as well. So whenever we design a system, always, we try to make e-commerce growth happening, although nobody really knows how big this growth might be. It's a complete, mystery, of course. You cannot tell how much you grow in this sector in the last 2 to 3 years, or even beyond that. We see new business models also arising, with wholesale. We do a lot of central dispensing, especially in the UK, a repeat prescription service, which is done within a wholesale, but within a central pharmacy. So we have to put orders together, not only on pharmacy level, but on patient level, and label them and putting them in a bag. And all of that together with a growth in SKU range and adds, of course, more complexity to it. And there are other facts as well, like the lack of personnel. If you talk to our clients in the Nordics or in the US, they tell us you cannot get people for night shift. It's nearly impossible. Nobody wants to work in a warehouse at night. So that's why technology needs to overcome this. And also restricted areas, accesses to cities. There will come the time, where it will not be so easy to enter a city with a vehicle. As simple as that, and I'll come back to this later. But all of that shaped the globalization of the supply chain, and it's fair to say that in this context, information is the new gold. So what data can be generated, and what can be done with it. In an omnichannel world, where what we call a value chain thinking, we have here on the one hand the example of delivering from warehouse to pharmacy goods, and you get empties and returns back. So not too many returns, but hopefully a lot of empty totes, or not. But where is the customer in this view? When, where, and how to deliver, and is key. And where is the right stock? How can I fulfill an order? All of that is an integrated part of the supply chain. And let's get to more of it more in detail. If we look at the healthcare value chain here, we have, of course, at the end, the patient, and before that, the pharmacy and the wholesale. But what we clearly see here is that information of the patient is basically key here. And we called it a collaboration platform. If we say, okay, we have in wholesale, compared to the point of sale, a very high degree of automation. So wholesalers usually have a good warehouse management system, have automation equipment, whereby in the pharmacy, often barcode scanning is seen as an alien technology. But it would make so much possible, for example, like central stock management, if stock is being shared and between those elements of the supply chain. I know how difficult this is, from customers which own pharmacies, from wholesalers which own pharmacies, but it would generate a lot of benefits. Also the central order management, so the order does not come in one way just to the pharmacy, but parallel via this collaboration platform to the wholesaler as well. And that can support the important role and the biggest USP the pharmacy, in my opinion, has is the role as a service provider for the community and for their patients. And how could this look like? As simple as that. A customer uses his or her mobile app, and then either collects, orders a home delivery or a delivery to a 24/7 pickup terminal, which can be attached to a pharmacy or in a pharmacy himself. So the app could show the patient, okay, where is the stock, in which pharmacy could I go, in which time to get my stock, or whatever lies on my way home, a pickup terminal, whatever. And if these collaborations platform are at the moment already on the verge to exist. So we company technology providers like us are being approached to support this, but also of course pharmacies and wholesalers are doing the same, and in Germany. So those will be reality in the near future, and most of you know this already because a lot of you are involved in those anyway. But of course, in order to achieve that, there are a lot of challenges which need to be overcome. All those things add complexity. We cannot wave this away. Sites become more complex, more processes, more intense. More stakeholders are being involved. A higher degree of automation. So that's complex. And there's a constant change going on, especially if you go 24/7, if you dive into deeper in the e-com world. And not only article change, seasons changed, and the supply chain changes as well. And at the end of the day, we have an increasing competition in a market which is already so competitive. Just if you look at some wholesale market, like the German wholesale market is not a marketplace; it's a bloodbath. And it's no wonder, companies are going together, because it's so difficult to make a profit there. And now you have Shop Apotheke, Doc Morris also penetrating this market, and maybe Amazon in the future. So that's really tight, and how to overcome this, What we say, okay, how we can support this with structure, with intelligence, logistics processes, and real-time data to make sure we do not collect data for us. We use data in order to provide it to our customers in a way that they can be most successful on the market with a standardized KPI and visualization. And it's all about forecasting, and being able to see trends in workload and identify changes of the business, and data can do a lot in there, in that instance. And at the end of the day, it's an orientation. It's an orientation which you can access worldwide, and where you can do benchmarks within your own organizations. And if you are global, of course, you can benchmark your individual countries to that. And all of that is a part of artificial intelligence, of course, which we use for predictive logistics. And predictive logistics is also an integral part of this example here. Red Pilot is one of our startups, which we have created to really have not only systems designed, but also to be able provide our customers the possibility to also run them most efficient. So the machines, the equipment, but also the users on a daily basis. So we use this artificial intelligence to estimate workload and to tell our customers exactly how many people they need in the manual stations tomorrow, to really be prepared on the labor side, but also on the machine operating side. At the end of the day, the collaboration along the supply chain is key to create really a value chain in an omni-channel world in which we certainly are. And the role of the pharmacists is changing therefore. But technology will be essential to make this change a success. And what we want to achieve at the end of the day is smiling customers and safe and satisfied patient. So that is the key for us who are taking part in the supply chain. We have a few minutes left, so I also like to speak to what I've mentioned beforehand about one mega trend, which is urbanization. Urbanization, of course, we know already today that on average more than half of the world's population live in urban areas, and almost all new growth is taking place there. You know, and in 2050, 2/3 of the world population will be in urban areas. And in Korea, it's already now 80%. So it's really ridiculous. And imagine there the traffic there, you know, and how to overcome this. Again, let's go back in history a little bit and look at the traditional pharma transportation. In the 60s or also in the 80s, the vehicles didn't look too much different from today. Of course, they have the doors were on the back, of course. With GDP, this has changed now. You open from the side, you have the curtains for temperature control. This is all well and good. But at the end of the day, it is a vehicle on 4 wheels, and it drives with fuel or electricity. So the question is, will that also be the pharma transport in the future? To be frank, I don't know. But I'd like to show you 2 examples from our customer in Spain. Novartis is a pharmaceutical wholesaler in Spain, and they have done 2 projects, 2 innovative projects to exactly tackle that subject. And one is called the EcoBike, and the other one is called the Pharma Drone. And I'll start with the EcoBike. I'd like to show you, I hope it's working, a little movie. And then I'll tell you a little bit about it. So the EcoBike, yeah, fascinating. You get 1 pallet in. You wouldn't have imagined this, you know, and It's also tested for temperatures between 0 and 35 degrees Celsius, and you're good for 1 hour. So you have from the if you leave the warehouse with 80 to 20 degrees Celsius inside, you're good for 1 hour, and it has been developed for a city in Spain called Vitoria. It's in the Basque country, and there the historical town center is not accessible by vehicle, but also not by any motor-driven vehicles. So they deliver it with this eco-bike, which is of course tackles certainly a trend of this time. The next one is even more fancy, Pharma drone. Again, I'll show you a video and then we'll have a chat about it. Pharma drone. This is a study. This is a study basically with the objective to analyze, the characteristics, what it takes, to deliver pharmaceutical products with a drone to areas which are difficult to access, but also with natural disasters difficult to access. Also for emergencies, where currently are used helicopters. So this study seeks to really see, okay, what under which conditions can this be done? This is not happening right now. What you've just seen is not happening. This is the vision. The vision is an autonomous drone. Which can supply this at the moment. This is also remote controls, and it can only fly for a kilometer. So this is not happening yet. But clearly, what this study seeks is, on the one hand, to lobby this within Spain to make this happen from a legal perspective, because at the moment it's the same conditions apply like you fly an airplane. It's exactly the same. So to have the legal framework, allow this in the future, but also have, seek out, what technology is required for that. And this is definitely something very exciting, in my opinion, and definitely one for the future. So this is my last few slides. Again, the world is changing, and innovation is in our DNA, so we're happy to work, we're happy to help, in terms of providing smart data, smart solutions, smart productions, smart technology for our customers, and be a part of that, and to make complexity simple. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Matthias. Are there any questions to Matthias? No questions about the drones or the e-bike? Matthias, are you still on?
Of course, I'm still on.
Yes.
I'm still on.
Yeah, we will come back to you shortly with some questions on aggregation. and how long it would delay normal commissionings, because there is a study going on where we look into different ways how to commission. When there is aggregation, there is requests from hospitals. We already bothered you with that, but we will come back to you. Also, I'm looking to the colleagues from Schäfer, so you will get also some questions for us in this. If there are no other questions from the audience, we would pass on to the next session. And thank you very much. All the best.
Thank you.
It's
See you. Bye-bye.
Martin on stage again. Thank you. Bye.
So thank you, Monica. So, ladies and gentlemen, those left in the room and following online, welcome to the fourth and final session of our supply chain conference. We're going to turn now and look at the medical devices regulation, the implications of the new legislation for distributors in particular. Unfortunately, this is going to be a completely online session, so everybody is joining us remotely. And we've also had a couple of dropouts of speakers, even from a remote perspective. But nevertheless, we still have three dedicated presenters who will join us for this session. The first one is Eric Hansen from the European Commission, and then we will have Oliver Hartmann, who is replacing Maud from the European Association of Self-Care Industries. And finally, we will have Jana Morakavova from MedTech Europe, who will give the industry perspective on the implementation of the regulations. But so I think in order and in the interest of time, let's move on. I don't know if Eric, who is our first speaker, is already on the line. If he is, I will just... Eric is...
Die reden ja da offensichtlich.
Eric is there, so just while he's getting set up. So Eric is the Deputy Head of Unit of the Medical Devices Unit for DG Health, DG Sante of the European Commission. Eric is a veteran of medical devices regulation. He's been with the unit in the Commission since 2012, and he has led the implementation of the PIP action plan and has been very much involved in the negotiations, which has led to the adoption of the new regulations, which we're going to discuss during the next hour or so. Eric has been responsible for a number of working groups within the Commission and dealing with medical devices. Eric has a Master of Laws, and I have summarized his bio. So if Eric has something to add or correct in what I've said, then he is more than welcome to do so at the beginning. So testing 1, 2, 3, if Eric is there.
I am here. Do you hear me?
Yes, Eric, we hear you.
Very good.
We're just waiting to see your presentation here in the room on screen, but I don't see it yet. So just bear with us for a second. Perhaps, maybe somebody from the technical team can speak to instruct him what to do. There's a mic here. So just bear with us a second, Eric.
Sure.
Hi, Eric. Can you share your screen? On the bottom, you see like a few icons. The first from the left is like a square with an arrow going up, and there you can share your screen, share your content.
I tried to do it, but it doesn't seem to work. Do you happen to have the presentation so I can tell you what?
No, we don't have the presentation.
We don't have it. I have sent it to you, but okay. Share content. Do you have it now or?
Not yet, but the icon, the first from the left, is it dark gray or light gray?
It's dark, so I should be able to have it there. The question is how I get my... There it is.
Okay, excellent. We see something coming up.
You have it now?
Yes, perfect.
Okay, great.
Go ahead.
So good morning, everybody. and sorry to have to join you this way. In fact, I also noticed that the flight I would normally have taken to Vienna this morning was cancelled already yesterday. So even without our mission ban, I would not have been able to join you today. And I will also have to leave you a little bit earlier because we have another WebEx conference concerning the possible shortages of medical devices in national healthcare because of the coronavirus, with the commissioners actually participating. So I might have to leave you pretty soon after my presentation, I'm afraid. So what I will try to do now is to explain briefly in 10 minutes why we are now coming with new medical devices regulations and the main content of these. And just to explain the background, most of you are aware that we have had quite turbulent times in the field of medical devices the last 8 years or perhaps even more. With the PIP breast implants scandal, which was followed up by an action plan from the commissioner in those days, Mr. Dali. And that was actually my first task, or the reason why I joined this unit was to deal with that action plan. So a result of this has been that we have also come up with the new regulations that were negotiated during 4.5 years with the legislators and that are now becoming applicable. We also have a lot of media attention from consortia of journalists in 30 countries, the implant files. And of course, on the top of this, we got additional issues to deal with, like the Brexit, medical devices becoming a main issue in the discussions on trade issues between President Trump and our ex-president Juncker. And now we also have issues with regard to our agreements with Switzerland and Turkey. So there are a lot of things going on for the moment, but I don't have the time to go into details on this today. The new regulations, the objectives of these are to increase the protection of patients and health. That's of course the overall and most important objective, but also to create greater transparency and information. So our new EUDAMED database will contain much more publicly available information on the devices. Also, what we have seen is that the clinical analysis, the clinical assessments have not in many cases been done in the depth that we had wished it to be done. So we have also increased the requirements for clinical data and evaluation. Another aspect which concerns you participating in this conference in particular is the greater clarity of supply chain obligations. I will come back to those. But also the higher detail of requirements is aimed also at increase the consistency and predictability of the requirements. So overall, the political objective were to promote confidence in the system, but also increased stability and a greater fairness so that we would make sure that all the same requirements would apply in all the member states. And the main tool for that is that we will now have regulations that are directly applicable in all member states instead of directives which were transposed into national legislation, and where there was always a danger that this was done slightly different in different member states. So the transitional period from the date of adoption of the new regulation in May 2017 is then the full application of the medical devices regulations on the 26th of May this year, and for the in vitro diagnostic devices we have 2 more years to go, 26th of May 2022. The reason why we have a later date for application for IVDR is that the changes are even bigger for IVDR than for MDR. Just a few words about the quite challenging work that all parties concerned are carrying out in this transition period. From the Commission side, we are just one of the players in this. Of course, the member states, manufacturers, importers, retailers, health professionals, everyone has to prepare for this. But from our side, what we have done basically is to set up the new governance in the form of the Medical Devices Coordination Group that met latest meeting yesterday through WebEx. Nowadays, notified body structures is a big challenge where we at least put in place the structures, but we have seen that the number of applications from notified bodies is not as high as we had wished at this stage. We have set up the scientific structures. The expert panels will be in place for the 26th of May. The new UDAMED is delayed, but this is no big surprise. So actually the new regulations foresee alternative methods to use while we are waiting for the final UDAMED. But what we foreseen to have at least on the 26th of May is the actor registration module. Then it's up to member states to decide whether they wish to make use of this or not. So you will have to see with your member states whether they will allow or recommend or even make obligatory the use of this for registration. The UDI system, there it's basically in place, but it's also slightly delayed then to put in place in practice because of the UDAMED delay. We are asking the standardization organizations to revise the standards. We have a communication campaign. So if you want to learn more, I would recommend you to go to the Europa website and look for medical devices, and there you will find quite a lot of information about the new regulations. With CEMD, which is the network of competent authorities, we have been working on a roadmap for the steps that needs to be taken, so you can find it on their website, and also a document that clarifies the transitional provisions that I will come back to. They are not very easy to grasp from the legislation, but in these documents you have more information. For supply chains, just one specific slide. It's not so much new in practice, I would say, but it's more specified. So for both importers and distributors, we have an obligation to check conformity with requirements for importers. For distributors, we have a due care obligation, which also means that distributors should take due care of observing whether there are problems with the fulfillment of the legislation with regard to the devices. There should be a verification made, sampling is mentioned, which of course doesn't mean that every copy of every single device should be checked, but there should be samplings made at certain intervals to make sure that the devices that are in the packages do fulfill the requirements. Storage and transport obligations then to make sure that storage and transport does not deteriorate the status of the devices, and also an information and cooperation obligation with the authorities responsible for the surveillance in practice. For importers, we also have obligations on the indication of their identity. We have the registration obligation, we have complaints, non-conformities register, and an obligation also to keep documentation. These are general obligations, I would say, for all new approach, so-called new approach directives, product directives and regulations. So it follows from what some of you might have seen, the so-called blue guide of the Commission, where you find all these general principles, and what we have in the medical devices regulations follow very much these principles. Critical issues right now. Some of you might have heard about the problem of the availability of notified bodies, meaning that some manufacturers are complaining that they cannot get their devices certified according to the new regulations before 26th of May, but I will explain how this is supposed to work, even if we have a relatively low number of notified bodies for the moment. The EUDAMED establishment I already mentioned, and then we have also noticed that there is, in some member states, there are not sufficient number of experts available. So we have a shortage of resources and expertise in some member states. Then I already mentioned the issues with the US, with Brexit, and the media interest that comes on the top when we would like to focus actually on the new regulations. I said I would like to explain how this should work even with a short number or a low number of notified bodies in place for the new MDR. In fact, there is a transition provision which is very important in this context, meaning that if you have a certificate under the current existing directive and you don't make major changes and it's still valid, it can also continue to be valid under the new regulations up to maximum the 26th of May 2024. What this has led to is that most manufacturers that have certificates expiring in this year or next year or maybe even in 2022 have asked for a recertification of their certificates with the existing notified bodies, of which we have around 50, before the 26th of May this year, so that they will have a long validity of their certificates also under the new MDR. So this is actually what the notified bodies are very busy with now, recertification, while which has also meant they have not been able to invest as much resources as they would wish in getting designated under the new regulations. So this is one reason why we don't have that many notified bodies designated at this stage. But I'm sure after 26th of May, when this recertification will end under the current legislation, they will be very active in getting designated under the new regulations. There is finally also a possibility for member states to issue derogations for critical medical devices where there is not a valid certificate, provided the device is critical for healthcare. And of course, there has been a check of the conformity with the legislation. So I will stop there, and if you want to learn more, you can find more on our Europa site. It's still under our previous DG Grow. It will move to DG Sante soon, all the information, but it's under DG Growth and sectors. You will find medical devices. You can also find information about what is going on in the medical devices coordination group, in the register of expert groups, and you can even provide comments on the new implementing regulations that we are issuing under the MDR and IVDR under the better regulation part. And I mentioned also that under the competent authorities website, there is also information, for instance, about how to interpret the transitional provisions. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Eric, for that great overview and putting the medical devices regulations and the requirements into context for us. I'll check in the room if there are some questions directly from the audience here. Nope, going once, twice. Nope. I also see there has been nothing coming in on the app, which I forgot to remind people following online. If they wish to ask questions, they could do so by using the app. Okay, Eric, I just have one quick question for you. I think most of the audience here and those following online are distributors or have an interest in following the requirements of distribution. And in particular, sampling is something which is, the sampling requirements in Article 14 of both regulations is something which is quite important for them, and to better understand what is meant by sampling. You touched on it with a couple of words, to say it's not on a pack-by-pack basis, for example. But could you maybe share some further thinking on that, or if you don't really, if I'm putting you on the spot, whether we will have the opportunity to engage with you and the member states in trying to define or put some guidance around what is meant by sampling in Article 14?
Yeah. You might have noticed, those of you that have looked into the new regulations, that it's 400 pages. Despite this, we have not been able to draft details about how to apply every article of the regulation. Already there are complaints that there are too many pages with 400. So a lot of this will have to be then developed in practice, exactly principles for how to apply it. We often do it by developing guidance documents that are published on our website. We have already published 35 guidance documents for the new regulations. We have not had the time yet to look into these issues on sampling, for instance, from importers and distributors. So there will be work undertaken on this, and there we would, of course, like to involve also those that have to apply this in practice, so that we come up with something that can be also used in practice without creating too much problems, but still meeting the objective of the legislation. So what I can say, how to apply it at this stage then without having these guidance in place, I think it's very much for the moment up to to importers and distributors to consider yourself on how much sampling at which intervals and of what that you would feel satisfied to or feel safe to believe that by these intervals or this number of samples, you will feel confident that the devices that you are importing or distributors do meet the requirements. So it's a kind of due diligence bonus pater familias that for what a normal serious importer or distributor would consider to do in order to feel also from your side confident that everything is in order. Of course, this is also something you can discuss with the competent authorities also in your member state to see what is their view at this stage. But as I mentioned, in the longer term, we should aim for having some guidance on this on European level.
Okay, thank you very much for that detailed answer. I think that's quite encouraging from our side. So we look forward to perhaps engaging with you to share some thoughts on what we believe would be a fair, let's say, approach to the sampling method. Okay, so last chance for any questions to Eric. I don't see that's the case. So thank you very much, Eric, for joining us remotely. We really appreciate your time, and we look forward to being in touch going forward.
Thank you very much.
Thanks.
And looking forward to see you next time.
Thank you, Eric. So, ladies and gentlemen, we will crack on with the program and move to our next speaker. Again, I apologize for Maud, who was not able to join us at the last minute due to an urgent other WebEx call. However, her colleague, Oliver Hartmann, who is the Regulatory Affairs Manager at the Brussels-based Association of European Self-Care Industries. I don't have further information on Oliver's bio, so perhaps if Oliver wants to, if he hears us, is online, wants to add anything to his background, perhaps you can do so before you commence your presentation. So if you're there, Oliver?
Yes, hello, good morning. Do you hear me?
Definitely, we hear you well. So if you want to carry on.
Thank you. Yes, concerning my role, first of all, at the HCP, so I'm the Legal and Regulatory Affairs Manager at HCP, responsible essentially for implementing the regulatory activities at our association with regard to the implementation of the MDR. And just before starting the presentation, apologies as well from my side for Maud's absence, given her an urgent call that has come up last minute. So I'm here today to give a bit the view of the or our perspective regarding the implementation and implications of the new medical device regulation with regard to the self-care sector. Just to give you a brief introduction on who we are. So the Association of the European Self-Care Industry essentially represents three types of manufacturers, namely non-prescription medicines, food supplements manufacturers, and also manufacturers of self-care medical devices, notably including as well substance-based medical devices. And I will come back later to explain a bit more what substance-based medical devices are. Just to give you a quick overview on our membership, which consists of national associations and international companies, as well as associate members. So now, with regard to the MDR itself and with regard to the adoption of the MDR in 2017, we consider that it has been and it is an opportunity for innovation for the self-care industry, and that it also helps strengthening the safety and efficacy requirements applicable to self-care medical devices. And we, of course, also welcomed the recognition of substance-based medical devices through the inclusion of Rule 21 in the new legal text. Previously, there was no specific rule on substance-based medical devices under the directives, as you may know. At the same time, however, we feel like that it's important to stress that disproportionate approaches concerning the qualification and classification of products should be avoided to really make use of this opportunity the medical device regulation provides. So, for example, in this respect, the correct qualification of a product is important to define, for example, the meaning and the definition of pharmacological means, which is also currently under revision and discussed in the relevant Commission working groups. And in this regard, it's important to note that definitions or any changes to these definitions should be very carefully considered and should not lead to an unintended exclusion, essentially, of all substance-based medical devices. Because, as you know, the distinction between substance-based medical devices and products which fall under the medicines legislation is that they act by physical chemical means and not by pharmacological, immunological, or metabolic action. And hence, of course, in this regard, an appropriate or a proportionate approach should be implemented. So, as I mentioned before, to explain a bit more in detail what are actually substance-based medical devices. So they are, of course, composed of substances or combination of substances, have a medical purpose, and as I just mentioned, do not achieve their main intended action by pharmacological, immunological, or metabolic means, but by chemical-physical means. For example, relating to processes such as local pH changes or the formation of physical barriers. Some product examples of substance-based medical devices you can see on the next slide. So, for example, eye drops, nasal sprays, topical creams such as moisturizing creams, or throat pastilles, for example, would fall under the category of substance-based medical devices. On the next slide, you see some of the key challenges that are currently being faced by substance-based medical devices given the ongoing implementation of the MDR. So in terms of transitional periods, for example, it is an important challenge at the moment to ensure the timely recertification of existing self-care devices so that they can benefit from the transitional periods. And at the moment, some of the notified bodies struggle with the numerous requests for recertification, and there's certainly in some instances a delay to obtain the recertification, which is vital to secure and to benefit from the transitional period established under the MDR. Then also, it's a challenge is of course as well that some of the existing devices that are not covered and that have been excluded from the scope of the MDR, such as, for example, medical devices containing microorganisms such as probiotics, should still benefit from the transitional rules. And there have been recently some controversial issues around this because competent authorities have taken the interpretation that such products would not benefit from the transitional rules under the MDR. And then also, importantly, of course, the lack of guidance on the concept of significant change is another challenge that is being faced by the industry and by the industry as a whole, because as you may know, to benefit from the transitional period, no significant changes may be undertaken to the design or intended purpose to medical devices after the 26th of May 2020. And of course, it is important for industry to know or to understand better the concept of what is considered a significant change in order to benefit from the transitional periods. Then in terms of notified bodies availability and capacity, as I already mentioned earlier, notified bodies have at the moment a limited renewal capacity with regard to MDD certificates. Also, the recognition of substance-based medical devices under the MDR and the certification of such products requires notified bodies to build up new expertise, of course, and it's therefore important to build up expertise in assessing the physical and chemical mode of such products. With regard to borderline and classification issues, we also have at the moment two important guidance missing, which deal with the clarification of the MDR classification rules. And also another important guidance is dealing with borderline products, setting out the definition of pharmacological means, which I referred to earlier. And in absence of these guidance, it's of course difficult to get a consistent approach between notified bodies and national competent authorities. So it's in this respect, it's difficult to get certainty with regard to the interpretation and application of such rules to the medical devices concerned. Then also, if you look at the box on the assessment practice under the MDR, substance-based medical devices are required only where applicable to comply with requirements of the medicines legislation on ATME, so on the absorption, distribution, metabolism, and excretion of substances. And here it's also important to apply a case-by-case and a risk-based approach in order to avoid a disproportionate implementation of the new rules. And also in this respect and with regard to the new Rule 21, it's also important to have a correct understanding of the new rules, and in particular that the consultation procedure only applies to products which fall under the first indent of Rule 21. And here also highlighting that a proportionate approach should be taken. And with that, having said, I thank you and stop. Thank you.
So thank you very much, Oliver, for that presentation. Before I check on the app, do we have questions in the room for Oliver? Everybody's a bit sleepy this morning. On the app, I don't see anything came in, but perhaps if there are no questions, just would have one before we would let you go, Oliver. Was just thinking, Eric mentioned, of course, the documents would be available on DG Santé website in due course, because there is a move from DG Grow in the European Commission, which is responsible for industry matters and growth, single market and so on, and it will be moved over to the health unit. With that move, do you see, Oliver, will it foster a kind of a closer collaboration between the medicines and medical devices regulators, particularly as the people in the room here or following online are involved in both medicines and medical devices? So would that facilitate a proper implementation of the regulation in regards to substance-based medical devices?
Yeah, I think in principle it's very welcome, and in principle we hope that the combination or the move of the medical device unit to DG Santé allows maybe for a more coherent approach and a more consistent approach and a closer collaboration by medicines authorities and medical device competent authorities, particularly when it comes to the assessment of borderline products and often substance-based medical devices, due to their form, are often considered as borderline products, and therefore it's sometimes not outrightly clear under which legal framework they would fall, and having therefore a closer collaboration and ensuring a good understanding of the applicable requirements, as well as, for example, the definitions on the pharmacological, immunological, and metabolic actions of the medical devices, competent authorities, and the medicines authorities is certainly very much welcome and hoped for.
Okay, thank you very much, Oliver, for that. So before we really let you go, no questions from the room? No. Okay, Oliver, thank you very much for your time. That is very much appreciated. So, ladies and gentlemen, we'll move on to our final intervention for session 4 on the medical devices regulation. And now we're going to hear from a representative of the European Medical Devices Industry Association, which is the trade body representing medical device manufacturers based in Brussels. And for this, we have Jana Morakova, who is the manager regulation and industrial policy at MedTech Europe. Jana is the manager of industrial policy and regulation at MedTech Europe. She runs various working groups within the association dealing with issues such as procedure packs, labeling, economic operators, and post-marketing surveillance. And these all help her members, which are manufacturers of medical devices, effectively prepare for the new regulations. So if Jana is there and can hear us, we will leave the floor to you.
Yes, hello, I'm here. I can hear you very well. Congratulations on the technological setup. I think it's working very well. So I'm hoping you can hear me fine as well.
Yes, we can hear you very well, Jana.
Great. Okay, so good morning or almost afternoon, everybody. I know it's a challenging time for me to give a presentation because I assume I'm just right before your lunch. Anyway, I'll do my best. I will, of course, focus my presentation on the implications of the new regulation for the manufacturers, but I will talk a little bit about the implications that we see for distributors as well, and I'll try where possible to give some practical advice. So it has been already mentioned that indeed the MDR implementation is ongoing. There are some challenges with regards to the notified bodies, etc. I will not go further into that because you've already heard about it from the other speakers. I would just like to summarize some of the key impacts on the manufacturer which the new regulation brought into place. So obviously the regulations, both MDR and IVDR, focus much more on the evidence and traceability across the device lifecycle. This is particularly visible in the post-market surveillance and vigilance. So there are new requirements for manufacturers about how to report when there is an incident case. There are new forms and cycles. Also, a lot of this information will be publicly available in the aforementioned database called UDAMET, which now is a bit delayed, but hopefully will be available sometime in spring 2022. A new requirement for the manufacturer, which has quite some implications on their IT databases and internal systems, is the UDI-DI and basic UDI-DI. So the assignment of these to the products and the product families. The manufacturers also have to comply with the general safety and performance requirements. So you will find this in the Annex 1 of the regulation. These are changes that will have a significant impact on the manufacturer's labeling, so the label itself, instructions for use, and possibly other material which is delivered by the manufacturer with the device. As mentioned, the UDAMET is a little bit delayed. In any case, what you should know is that it will be obligatory for manufacturers to register in UDAMET, as it will be for importers and authorized reps. It is not foreseen for the distributors to be registered in UDAMET. So based on this, this is really just a snapshot of the key changes. Manufacturers are, of course, adapting their quality management systems and trying to get their products either recertified based on the directives or where possible or feasible due to the notified body capacity, applying for the MDR certifications as well. The regulation also brings in more focused and structured interactions with other economic operators, such as importers, distributors, and authorized representatives. And with regards to the distributors, as I mentioned, it's a lot more structured and there's more clear emphasis on the actions that each economic operator has to take. With regards to distributors, there are particular obligations regarding post-market surveillance and vigilance. So it is explicitly foreseen now that the distributor cooperates with the manufacturer. It is also foreseen that the distributor receives complaints directly and keep records for the sake of traceability. So this is probably something that the distributors will have to reflect in their internal system because it may lead to increased workload. And of course, we would recommend to carefully assess the changes and plan for compliance as ahead of time as possible. Distributors will for sure need more robust procedures because of all these new requirements. And I would just like to mention here the Article 16.2, which refers to certain actions taken by, for instance, importer or distributor, such as changes to the labeling, to the packaging and translation. So these will require certified, qualified quality management system, certified from the notified body. So this is something I wanted to bring up for you to be aware, especially now in the situation where notified bodies are under certain overload of work and constraints. So this is just something that you should take into account probably and plan for that. As mentioned before by the other speakers, so there's no EU level guidance for economic operators yet. However, there is the HPRA, so the Irish National Competent Authority guidance, which might be of certain help. And a point I wanted to also focus on, so we're getting some questions about if there are new requirements under the regulations about contracts between the distributor and the manufacturer, possibly. But so there are no new requirements in the regulation itself. But as a result of the regulation, it is likely that many manufacturers will want to update their contracts with especially their direct distributors regarding who is responsible for what and sharing of information and that kind of thing. It is of course up to those parties, to the manufacturer and the distributor to define exactly what goes into the contract. So for instance, under Article 14.2, there is a new obligation specifically that the distributor should verify the CE mark and the declaration of conformity. So this is of course something that could be accomplished by the distributor having access or a copy of the declaration of conformity, but it is not said that this is a must. It is one of the ways. Details of this may be in the contract that the two parties will put together. And as I mentioned, it is up to them how they decide to make this contract and how detailed it would be. So I think I will stop there as I covered the points I wanted to on manufacturers and distributors, and I'm happy to try and answer questions if there are any. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Jana, for that. That was quite on the spot, I think, for the audience here in the room and following online, as indeed most of the people here are distributors. I'm just looking around the room first to see if there are any questions. I don't see anybody jumping up or down, so I guess that is not. I would have maybe one or two questions for you. The first question is, quite happy to see in your slide that you could imagine that perhaps some of the obligations which would be incumbent on the distributor could to a certain extent be covered in a contract, a technical agreement between the manufacturer and the distributor. This is a question rather about your sense, your feeling within your organization. Do you feel that manufacturers within MedTech Europe would be open to including such provisions within those technical agreements for their direct distributors, as you mentioned?
Thank you for the question. So this is not something that we have discussed with our members on a general MedTech Europe basis. So it is more up to each manufacturer how they want to design and structure the contract. And of course, the distributor needs to agree with that particular contract. So I don't unfortunately have any input on this. I think it is really a case-by-case basis. Of course, it also depends if the distributors are part of the same organization as the manufacturer, in which case they would be covered by the manufacturer's quality management system. There are lots of different cases, so we don't have any overarching input on this.
Okay, thank you, Jana, for that. Just one perhaps final question which came in there. Distributors don't need to register in UDEMED. That was clear in your presentation, and of course clear from the regulations. However, do other registration obligations exist for distributors?
So indeed, it's true. The distributors do not need to register in UDEMED, but national registration obligations may still apply. And for that, we would recommend to the distributors to keep an eye on the new laws that are being updated now in many member states, which may include such provisions on the registration of distributors. So we know, for example, Germany is updating a law regarding medical devices. Same is true for Poland or Czech Republic. So this is just something we recommend to keep an eye on.
Okay, thank you very much for that, Jana. With that, final chance for a question to Jana? No. Okay, so therefore I think we can bring this final session of our two-day conference to a close. There is nothing really left for me to do except say that medical devices regulations are about to kick in very soon, so distributors across Europe really need to be prepared to comply with the legislation, as it's not some time away anymore, it's really tomorrow. So I think we have a lot of work to do. There are a lot of uncertainties. From our side as GIRP, we will engage with the European Commission to try to bring more clarity to what is meant by sampling, and hopefully if Jana agrees, we can engage with the industry perhaps to explore further whether or not such technical agreements could be a way to support the compliance of distributors with the legislation. So we have a lot of work to do at our side, but also a lot of work needs to be done at your side for those distributors or our members, but we look forward to working with you in the weeks and months ahead. So with that said, there is nothing left to do except welcome Monica back onto the stage, who will introduce our last and final speaker for our conference and to close the conference. So thank you very much for your attention during the last hour.
Thank you very much, Martin. Yeah, it's now my great pleasure to announce our final speaker, as Martin said. We are really happy that Dr. Christa Virtuma-Hoche will join us also by WebEx, as the situation is difficult also in Austria. I think she will be very busy for the moment, but we really appreciate that nevertheless Christa has taken the time to join us here to give the final message, the closing statement. Her CV is quite long. So Christa studied biochemistry at the Technical University in Vienna and did her doctoral degree at the Austrian Institute for Medical Physiology. She then joined the Austrian National Institute for the Quality and Control of Drugs and was there from 1983 to 1998. And was then head of the licensing division for medicinal products. Since the establishment of the Austrian Medicines and Medical Devices Agency on the 1st of January 2006, she was head of unit for marketing authorizations and lifecycle management, and then she became head of the agency. And last not least, Christa is also chair of the EMA, so the European Medicines Agency Management Board. Christa, I can see you, and I think it's perfectly working. We are very much looking forward to your final statement to close our conference, and many thanks for having joined us here.
Thank you very much, Monica, for this kind introduction and also for inviting me to give these closing remarks. I hope you can hear me.
Perfectly well.
Perfect. That's good. That's good. So I really would like to send you my best regards, and I'm very sorry that I can't be with you personally, but the present circumstances are demanding that there is a change in our behavior, and all these measures are necessary in order to stop the further development of the pandemic situation. Yes, everything is a little different at the moment, and what is especially very, very important is the functioning of the supply chain. In order to guarantee that the availability of the medicinal products for the patients. So many stakeholders are involved in the supply chain, but the management is with you, the stakeholders. So a very, very important role. And I hope you took the opportunity of this conference also to exchange information on the topics of the agenda, because it really was a very, very good agenda, interesting, hot topics. And I would like in my final and closing remarks to focus on one or the other item. So first I would like to start with the topic of the Falsified Medicines Directive, the implementation of the safety feature. And yesterday you had the discussion on this topic, and I'm quite sure you had a heated discussion. We have now more than 1 year experience, so 1 year the so-called stabilization phase. And yeah, my impression is that the system is working quite well. All partners are committed to the system. But my personal opinion is that the system still is not really perfect to have a final go. It's my opinion, and I'm also a member of the Austrian committee who is observing the system, the observer from the side of the authority, that we only can give a final go to the real system when there are two things fulfilled. First of all, that there is no uncertainty for the patients, and that we don't have a further reduction of availability. We are struggling with availability problems. In addition, we have now the situation due to the coronavirus that we are not 100% sure whether this has also an implication on the availability of medicinal products. We have the issues on nitrosamine impurities, so we really don't need and further reduction in availability. So this brings me to the next topic. It was a priority topic in the EU Medicines Network Strategy to 2020, and of course it will be a priority topic for the next year. To prevent problems in the supply of medicinal product and to improve the management. And this is exactly the topic of this conference. So this is very, very important. We all know it's a global problem. So we can't solve it at the national level, although we are trying to find out measures and actions which we can implement. There is a task force implemented at the EU level, where a joint group of the EMA and the national competent authorities, and they are working now in 3 work streams for marketing of authorized medicinal products, for supply chain disruption, and also to further improve communication. It was interesting to find out that at the beginning of the work of this task force, we identified that we do not even have a common definition of the term shortage. So this was very important to lay down, and the shortage is now defined as the shortage is occurring when the supply does not meet the demand at the national level. So I think the most important word is here demand. How can we calculate the demand? And the demand relates to the request for a medicinal product by healthcare professionals or patients in response to the clinical need. And wholesalers are usually the key supply link between the marketing authorization holders and the users of the medicine. We all know that shortages have multiple causes, like manufacturing problems, supply management, parallel trade, and also commercial decisions. And the Commission just recently decided that they will launch a study. The original date for launch was now spring 2020. I'm quite sure that it will be postponed a bit. But the studies should evaluate what are the reasons for shortages and about possible EU and member state level actions. And I hope that at least there is one positive aspect of the coronavirus, that all people are thinking now and are realizing how we are depending on China, and implement some actions to bring back, to keep first the production in Europe and to bring back production to Europe. So what can we do at national level? As I said, we cannot solve the problem, but we have to analyze and identify action which can be taken at national level. So what have we done in Austria? We also are sitting now around the table, all participants, all members of the distribution chain, and with the goal to increase transparency and to improve the communication. We have now a piece of legislation which is with the obligation to notify a shortage in case a product is not available at all or the demand can't be met. I know it is difficult to calculate the demand, and there are different reasons why the demand can't be met by a marketing authorization holder. And in addition, sometimes the quantity is then exposed to an unpredictable sale via a parallel export. And this can also cause problems, especially in small markets and markets with low prices. In the new piece of legislation, we do have in Austria now, from the side of the authority, also the possibility to ban parallel export for those medicinal products where the demand can't be met and where we don't have an alternative. And this, of course, has to be proven by the authority. But also, we really are struggling in order to have medicinal products available. We are fully aware that also storage and transport obligations are to be met. So you all know that we have the EU Good Distribution Practice Guideline, which was revised during the last years, and this guideline reflects the expectation of the European authorities during transport and distribution of medicinal products. A lot of improvement have been realized during the last years, but nevertheless, some questions are still to be harmonized. I would say that with the cold chain products, it seems to be very well under control throughout the supply chain, from the manufacturer to the entire patient, but there is still room for improvement regarding the transport of the medicinal products, which have to be stored at room temperature. So the temperature conditions have to maintain within acceptable limits through the transport. So given the diversity of ways to achieve the quality standards required under the GDP guidelines, the Austrian wholesaler and manufacturer, also together with my colleagues from the Austrian authority, developed the so-called Codex for Transportation of Medicinal Products in Austria. We are very proud of this Codex, and we would like to share this Codex also with a lot of colleagues in the other member states. And of course, the obligation and provision in the GDP guidelines also has to be respected. Now, I want to thank all the organizers, and I want to join Monica in thanking the organizers and the speakers and you, the participants of this conference. And I'm quite sure this conference will be remembered by all. And I do hope that by this time next year, we can tell about this conference with a smile in our face and meet again. So I'm looking forward seeing you next year, and I wish you all a safe trip back home. And with this, I would like to give back to Monica And I think it's the closing of the conference.
Yes, indeed it is. Many, many thanks, Christa. We warmly appreciate it to not miss this conclusion of our conference. And thank you for having shown the Austrian transport code. We think on European level, this is our best practice example, which we try always to replicate in other countries, but so far it was not yet successful, but perhaps sooner or later we will get there. Next year we will gather in Madrid, so your colleague Maria will then hopefully either do the opening or the closing, and instead of Andreas Krasnik, it should be Manuel Ibera. So yeah, we hope then to have many more participants physically present than we had today. But there have been several members really committed to GIRP, and they are still here in the room with us. So thank you very much for that. And Christa, for you, we wish you all the best in the coming days and weeks. It's for sure not going to be an easy job. Many thanks for joining, and all the very best. Thank you. And it was not so nice circumstances to be in Vienna, because I was especially happy to have that conference in my hometown, but the circumstances could have been better.
Yeah,
thank you.
But hope to see you soon again.
Yes, me too. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, so now some practicalities again. The presentations will be available online. You have under this link, we'll also send out a reminder with a link for you and the login and the password details. We will also share with you the pictures from the photographer. There are some pictures uploaded on the app already, so we invite you to have a look. And we would like to warmly thank all our moderators and speakers for sharing your insights, your know-how, and for your inspiring presentations. And last but not least, a big thank you to all our sponsors who have made this conference possible. And now it is time for our farewell lunch. There will be a buffet, which is going to be served in the room where is breakfast. But we will then eat in the ballroom. This hotel has a very nice ballroom, which you have not seen yet, and where we are looking forward to take our lunch. Many thanks for your attention, and many thanks for your commitment and dedication. And also thank you to the ones watching over the web streaming, which was there for those who did not want to or could not travel to also follow the conference. Thank you very much.